And then this allows our members to go back and listen to these calls in the future based on the topics that we have. And then finally, I think everybody in the group is good tonight, but if there's any misconduct, we will cut you off and kick you out and not listen to you anymore. So at any rate, I'm thrilled for our guest tonight. I've recently gotten to know Evie, and I'd like to just briefly read her bio. Evelyn is a retired commander with the Montgomery County, Maryland Police Department with over 35 years of experience in law enforcement profession. Evelyn has served in a variety of assignments during her career to include DARE instructor, public information officer, director of internal affairs division, and district commander. Since her retirement, Evie has instructed law enforcement executive officers throughout the United States and as an anti-terrorism instructor for the United States Department of State to national police forces worldwide. Currently, Evelyn is the president of Flathead Republican Women, which is where I've gotten to know her. And I think the value she brings tonight is to talk a little bit about how public service has affected her as we all look to run for offices, regardless of what those offices are, whether it's school board, county commissioner, city council, et cetera. All of our families and our lives are affected in one way or another. So Evie, I'd like to turn it over to you. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about your background, what you're doing with Flathead Republican Women, as well as how it's affected and changed your life over the years of your career.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I am not an expert at Zoom meetings, so please bear with me. I'm learning, but I really, this is great. And so I thank you for the invitation. Many of you I know, and you know me, but you probably don't know a lot about my background. As Jim said, I was in law enforcement as a sworn law enforcement officer for 25 years with Montgomery County, Maryland Police Department. During that period of time, I rose through the ranks. I retired as a commander from that police department. It's a very large police department on the East Coast, just outside of Washington, D.C. We have, at this point now, we have in excess of 1,600 sworn and civilian employees. So it's a very large police department. You talk about public safety and public service. You know, kind of interestingly, I never really thought I'd be a police officer. I went to college. In my last year of college, I interned with our state's attorney's office in Maryland in Montgomery County, and was approached by someone who said, "What are you doing when you graduate from college?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I want to go to law school. I want to do all these things." And they said, "Well, the police department's hiring. Why don't you apply to that?" So it was sort of by accident, in a way, that I became a police officer. I didn't have a lot of money at that point. I couldn't really afford to go to law school. So I thought, well, I'll apply to the police department and see what happens. And I have to be honest, best decision I ever made in my life. I've always been somebody who has been community oriented. I was very involved in my church growing up and doing community service where that was concerned. So law enforcement was I guess it was just sort of a natural progression for me to get into that profession. And it really fit. Public safety and public service, for me, public safety and public service can be very complicated at times. I worked in a very liberal community in Montgomery County. And for those of you who watch the news and perhaps Fox News, which is pretty much what I watch, you have probably heard Montgomery County mentioned frequently with the issues that are going on in their library, like we have here, their school systems, like we have here. They've made the national news many, many times recently in the last year or so. So it's a very liberal community. I tried to work closely with everybody in the community. It didn't matter to me whether they were conservatives or liberals. As a police officer and as a police commander, that was insignificant. I had to learn to work with everybody. It was kind of funny. I had a picture of me and George Bush, who was president at the time, hanging behind my desk. And I had some of my liberal community service or community advisory board members would come in and refuse to sit in my office because they didn't want to look at the picture of me and George Bush. And I said, well, it's my office and he is our president, so you can leave. And that's pretty much how I left it. They never left and everything seemed to work out. But it's so critically important for us to be able to work with our communities. And those of you on this call who are either candidates or who work in public service right now as legislators or commissioners or the various positions you have, you understand the significance of public service. And it really is service. I used to laugh when police officers would get mad and somebody would say, why are you stopping me? I pay your salary. I said, and I would say to them, yep, that's right. And you tell them, and we want to provide you the greatest service we can possibly provide you. And that is keeping you safe. So yeah, people did pay our salaries, but our purpose was to keep people safe. So anyways, I retired in 2007 from Montgomery County Police, and I continued to work in the law enforcement arena. I was fortunate to be able to work for the Penn State University. I've done training for them since 2009, all law enforcement leadership related training. I also had the opportunity beginning in 2012 to work for the US Department of State in their anti-terrorism assistance program. And that involved traveling around the world to places I never dreamed I would ever go to, or maybe even want to go to in some places, to work with national police forces on issues related to how they address the threats of terrorism. It's basically as simple as that. My portion of it, I didn't do the tactical training, I did the leadership component of it. But I would find it very interesting. Most of the time when I was doing this work was when President Obama was president of our country. And I recall being in, well, the Philippines was one place. They had a really great viewpoint of President Obama. They thought he was fantastic. They listened to the news. They listened to all the things that they said about how great he was. And I obviously couldn't make any comment because I was representing the US government, but it was really aggravating to me to not be able to respond and really tell them what was going on in the country. But again, that wasn't my position. And I didn't want to start an international incident. So I kept my mouth shut and I listened to the compliments that I got. And actually, there were some people who were not terribly fond of our government at the time. But it really, I guess it's what started the ball rolling for me to want to get involved in politics. And I say politics kind of loosely because I'm not a candidate for an office, but I do run the Republican Women's Club. I joined in 2018, Flathead County Republican Women. And the reason I joined was I really wanted to meet and associate with and work with like-minded conservatives, because over the course of my career, I didn't have a lot of like-minded conservative people to work with. Incidentally, the day I retired, I went to my police chief and I told him I was retiring. And he said, you know, Evie, I bet that someday I'm going to see you in politics. And I just laughed and I said, I really doubt it. I don't think I'm ever going to run for politics. I'm probably going to run from it. And here I am running back to it. So I guess it's a full circle thing for me. So that's kind of my background. But I really, in 2015, I really became extremely upset and frustrated with the anti-police rhetoric that I was hearing. If you're a law enforcement officer, I guess same with military officers, military personnel, you understand it's not just what you do, it's your life. It's in your heart. It's probably in your heart till the day you die. And that's how I feel about law enforcement. And when I started hearing commentary about how corrupt police were in the United States and how brutal they were and how horrible they treated people and how we are all racists, I ran internal affairs in our division for 4 years. During that time, our department was under investigation by the Department of Justice for allegations of racial profiling. We got caught up in the pattern and practices lawsuits that were going on in the late 90s and 2000s. And I learned at that point that we didn't have a racist police department. We had a few issues. We had some disciplinary problems, nothing significant. But then going around the country and even going around the world and working with other law enforcement agencies, police are good people. They do good things. They believe in what they do. And yeah, there are a few bad apples, just like there are in any profession. But I really was angry and frustrated at the rhetoric that was being spewed from politicians and the media and people who just, they've never done the job, so they don't understand. And I hate to sound like that person, like I'm the know-it-all, but until you've done it, you don't get it. And so that was kind of one of the founding things that got me looking into politics. And then when Donald Trump decided that he was going to run for president, my first reaction was, are you kidding? I was not necessarily a Donald Trump fan at the very beginning. But as I listened to him and as I heard what he was saying to Americans and people like me and people like us on this call who really just care about our country, We want our country to be the best it can be. We all believe it is the greatest country in the world. I truly believe that from the bottom of my heart. Having traveled around the world and seen levels of corruption in law enforcement and government that really does exist and is really just pervasive throughout law enforcement organizations, we're not that people. We're not those people here. We are a good country with good people. So I started to listen to Donald Trump, and I remember the night he got elected, laying in bed. I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning, and my husband and I were laying in bed, and I actually broke into tears when it was announced that he won as president. That's how impassioned I was about him winning. And I think a lot of people probably felt that way because I think they saw him as kind of the savior of the country because of what he said, and I think proved to be true as president, despite all the things that he went through. So back to Flathead County Republican women. That's my background and my interest in politics, but I wanted to meet like-minded people here. So I joined Flathead County Republican Women in 2018 as a member. And I guess because I'm that person who always likes to get involved, I started going to board meetings. I wasn't a board member, but they were open to all the members. So I started going to board meetings and became very interested in how this organization actually worked and what it was that we did. And in some cases, what we weren't doing, which I thought we should be doing. So I had the opportunity, I ran for second vice president and was elected to that position, and then first vice president, and then subsequently I became president in January. I would like to give you just a little history of Republican women's groups. This isn't something that just, kind of sprang up over the last 20 or 30 years. Republican women's groups have been actually active groups since before women even had the right to vote. As early as the 1800s, there were numerous Republican women groups that were sort of fractured, but there were groups around the United States. At one point, the state of Indiana alone in the late 1800s had 140 different women Republican groups. This was before we could even vote. So I think a lot can be said about the commitment of women in politics, even when we couldn't be in politics, even when we were excluded from probably the most important thing of politics, and that is voting. The Republican platform of 1872 actually included as one of their values the loyalty of women of America for their noble cause of freedom. And it was after that, when the Republican platform actually reached out to women Republicans, that groups started to flourish around this country. The oldest women's Republican group in history is Salt Lake City, which started in the late 1800s. That's the oldest one on record. In 1938, the Republican National Committee actually called a meeting with members of and leaders of the many Republican women groups around the nation. And it was at that time when they formed what was then called the Federation of Women's Republican Clubs, which now is the National Federation of Republican Women. Montana in 1938 was one of the first 11 chartered clubs. So we actually are part of the beginning of the chartered Republican women clubs in our country. So for 84 years, we have been active in this state and other clubs around the country, basically supporting Republican values and supporting those people who are running for office. The purpose that the NFRW serves and what they recognize is, number one, is fostering loyalty to the Republican Party. That's our number one tenet. All Republican women clubs under the National Federation of Republican Women have to demonstrate their loyalty to the Republican Party. We don't necessarily vet members when people join, but it's pretty easy to tell after a relatively short period of time who buys in and who doesn't buy in. We don't invite Democrats to our meetings. We don't allow Democrats to speak at our meetings. We don't want to support anything that recognizes a Democrat that would go against something that we Republicans believe in. A second one of our purpose is to promote education among members, not only at the national level, also at the state and at our level. We want to encourage cooperation among the different groups and the actual party, the Republican Party as well, we have biannually, the National Federation and the Montana Federation have conventions. And at these conventions is when they build their bylaws, they make the changes, they invite speakers and politicians that are both national, state, and local politicians to talk and educate us on the issues that are important to Republican women. We promote the exchange of ideas, and we need to be able to work together to discuss issues from our perspective that relate to the Republican Party. And finally, the National Federation really encourages this national approach to addressing Republican issues. So it's not just local, it's state and it's national. And when you join a Republican Women's Club, you also join the Montana, if you're in Montana, you also join the Montana Federation and the National Federation. So our dues are divided up between the three groups of Republican women. I went to the conference in October for the Montana Federation of Republican Women, and it was announced there that the National Federation of Republican Women now has 65,000 members nationally. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. And that number has exponentially since the election of Donald Trump as president. I mean, I'm talking like think about the commitment of women to the Republican Party, to the commitment of women to believing that Donald Trump did a great thing for our country. I believe he did. So what does Republican women do? Basically, we follow all the tenets of the National Federation and the Montana Federation. We are a separate entity from other Republican groups in the county. We work alongside the Central Committee and we work alongside Pachyderm, but we are not part of those. We may share memberships in those, but we actually work autonomous from those groups. But with that being said, we work very closely with those groups because we all have the same purpose. We all want to get the best people elected to office. We want to educate our electorate. I firmly believe that uninformed and misinformed electorate is the most dangerous thing that we have in this country. So we all have to work to educate the people to what our principles are and what our values are and why what we stand for is so important. I think all we have to do is look at what's happening in Ukraine right now to see what happens when a democracy is destroyed or is attempting to be destroyed. And for those of you who get our newsletter, you'll see that my letter this month in the newsletter, my message to our members is about that, about the division that we need to overcome in our party. We've got to come together because the goal is really to save this country. That's what I believe. So our primary function in Flathead County Republican Women is to fundraise and support our local, state, and national candidates. Of course, this year we have a national election, which is a very important election for us in the state of Montana. So we do a lot of fundraising. One of our biggest fundraisers, and many of you already know this, is our chocolate extravaganza. Every year we do a chocolate extravaganza, which is really our biggest fundraiser. And we vet the candidates, and that money that we raise at the chocolate extravaganza is given to our vetted candidates. And hopefully it has an impact for them. It helps them with their campaign, with their election. And like I said, that's our biggest fundraiser. Some of the other fundraisers that we do the last couple of years, we've done gun raffles, and we've done really well with those. We look for opportunities to raise money for our candidates because that is our number one goal. Second to that, and very close to that, is our educational component, is educating our members, educating our community as to what it is that we do. As the new president of the club, and Jim, you and I have had conversations about this, one of my goals is to develop a strategic plan for the club. I think that's something that we have been lacking, and I think a strategic plan is critical to be able to move any organization forward. So we have made great, I have to say honestly, great leaps and bounds on this effort. One of the people on the panel tonight, in fact, Jerry Miller, is on our strategic planning committee, and we have been working diligently to come up with goals for our club. And I think that the goals are very much reachable goals. They're not things that we can't accomplish. And I think by accomplishing those goals, it'll just go leaps and bounds for our organization and for what's happening in Flathead County in terms of Republican values. We want better marketing. We're improving our website. We're getting more information out on Flathead County Republican women. We are reaching out to young voters, which is absolutely critical. If we don't reach out to the youth in our community, I mean, I have voted in every election since I was old enough to vote. I grew up in a very conservative family. My parents said, when you're old enough to vote, you will vote. They didn't tell me who to vote for, but of course they were conservative. So the message was really pretty clear who I should be voting for. But I voted from the time I was 18 years old, and I have never missed an election. And I hope that all young people who are old enough to vote now understand the importance and the value of that. So that's one of the outreach programs that we are doing with Republican Women, is reaching out to the youth. In fact, in May, we are going to have a meet and greet forum where we are going to invite young Republicans in Flathead County to sit down at roundtable discussions to meet with our candidates. I think it's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun, and it may give them the first opportunity they've ever had to actually speak to somebody who is either in politics or running for politics. And I'm hoping they'll come away with a different perspective and a very positive perspective from that. And again, finally, our outreach to the community. It's kind of funny. I've being who I was and doing the kind of job that I did, community outreach and community policing was it just had to be done. It was something you had to do in order to be effective as a police officer and in law enforcement. But I've had people say to me, why would you as a Republican want to reach out to groups of people who are perhaps underserved in some respects in the community, homeless, women's shelters, pregnancy centers? That's something that the Democrats do. Well, yeah, that's probably true. It's also people who vote for Democrats who are oftentimes in these situations in their life. And the reason they do is because it's the Democrats that are reaching out to them, and the Republicans oftentimes are not always, but oftentimes are not, or are not reaching out to them effectively. So I have made it one of the goals of our organization that we are going to start working with some of the underserved communities in Flathead County. And those people who feel that the only people who care about them are Democrats, because that's not true. I remember a story my mother told me. My mother's mother was from Ireland, and my mother told me she grew up in a family of 6 kids. And she said on any given day when she'd come home from school, she grew up in New York, but they moved to Stamford, Connecticut when the kids were young. And she said, my mother, on any given day, I'd walk in from school and there'd be a bum, as they called them back then. That was the term my mother used, a homeless person. I guess that's politically correct to say, would be sitting at the table having a meal. And we'd walk in, we didn't know who they are half the time, and there'd be 1 or 2 or 3 people. And she said, my mother's feeling was, those are people that are less than I am, and they need some help. And then they would do things like weed my grandmother's garden or repair something on the house that needed to be fixed. And that's how I was raised. I was raised to believe that we just look at everybody equally. And regardless of their position in life, we need to respect people. And of course, nowadays, we all kind of shudder at the thought of a stranger sitting at our dining room table, especially being a police officer. But with that being said, I think it was a great lesson to learn growing up for my brother and sister and I, to learn that, you have to treat people fairly and equally. And so I think this is a very valid outreach in our community. And I think that Republicans sincerely care about people in our community. I don't feel, my personal perspective is that may not be so sincere on the Democrat side. I'm not looking to get a vote. I'm just looking to reach out and help these people. But I think by reaching out and helping these people, they will see the Republicans are good, decent people, and they might want to vote for us. And ultimately, that's our goal. We want to grow our Republican base. I've also started networking with some of the other Republican clubs in our district. The state of Montana under the Federation has 5 different Republican women districts. We are in District 1. In our district, there are 4 other Republican women clubs. There's Lake County, Sanders County, Flathead County, and Lincoln County, which is the newest one of the 4 clubs. Mineral County is also in our district, but they don't have a Republican Women's Club. So they reach out, and our associate members, most of them was Sanders County. So I have started networking with these other Republican women's clubs in our district, again, for the same reason that I'm reaching out to the other groups within Flathead County. We need to network, we need to share ideas, we need to exchange ideas. The only way we're going to really learn is if we learn from each other, and we may learn the mistakes that other clubs have made. We will help each other with other activities. And speaking of other activities, our debate on April 19th, which is coming up at Flathead Valley Community College, which is our congressional debate, we have paired our efforts with not only our Central Committee and Pachyderm, but we have Sanders County, Lincoln County, and Lake County all stepping up to help sponsor this event, not only with in-kind contributions, but with money as well. So it really pays off, no pun intended, to network with other organizations and other clubs that share the same goals and values as we do. So it's been great. I've really enjoyed working with the other clubs. I've attended their meetings, their general meetings. I've been to every general meeting of each one of these clubs since I became president. And we're going to continue to do that as part of our networking and outreach. I guess I would wrap it up by saying, and you all can say, might sound a little uppity saying this, but I'm very proud of Flathead County Republican women. And I really think that my goal is that Republican women in Flathead County will be the face of Republicans in our county. That's what I want people to feel about us. I want them to see us, know us, hear us, understand what we do, why we do it, and recognize us as people that really want to give back to Flathead County. I know some of the people on this Zoom call have worked with us. We support our candidates very strongly, and we want to continue to do so. And the only way we can do that is to get our ideas out and share what we do and how we do it with the people in Flathead County. So I'm really honored to be president of this club. And I am absolutely honored to work with the people that I do work with in this club. We have a tremendous membership. I have a tremendous board. And I just want everyone to know how dedicated we really are to Flathead County.
Evie, thank you so much for that. I'm going to stimulate some conversation here with some questions for you. And then that'll give people time to come up with their own. First of all, I did want to recognize both Nicole and Samantha, who are Nicole's thinking about running for school board, so we're excited to hear that. And Samantha officially submitted her paperwork to be a precinct captain for her district. So both of them rising to the occasion. So, we have a lot of people that listen to this call that are running in politics for the first time, and they don't know how to get connected or how they could receive support from some of these organizations. So with you on the line tonight, how can they reach out to you and get support? And what would that support look like? Obviously, we'd like them to be a member of Flathead Republican Women, but how can we return that favor back to them?
Well, first of all, we have a great website, which they can go to, fcrwomen.org. And if people go to that website, they will see links to not only how to reach out to our board members, to include me, but links to reach out to other organizations within Flathead County, Central Committee, Pachyderm, and even organizations at the state and national level as well. So just through our website alone, there are ways for people to access all of us. And when people send me a message, it comes into our email, and then I respond via that email as quickly as I possibly can, because I check those emails on a daily basis. Obviously, we would like people to join our organization. We want women and men. Men can be associate members. We have some men that are associate members, to include Jim and John and other people on the call, Rod, which is critically important, because it's not just about women doing this. It's about everybody being involved in what it is we are trying to accomplish. So to reach out, again, through our email, through our website, there are ways for people to contact us, to contact me. I call people. I have no problem with calling people, people who want to get involved. I think I called Jerry when she told me she was interested. I gave her a call and said, yeah, let's talk. The best way for us to be able to get this done is to talk to one another, to communicate. So I think if that answers your question, I think that's the way to start at any rate.
Yeah, and I'll brag on you a little bit, or at least the Flathead women, that your organization has done a fabulous job, not only raising money, but getting people involved and networking. So I would highly encourage anybody to reach out to the Republican women's groups and seek their resources and their support, show up to their meetings, let them know that you're running for office and what position you're running for, and allow them to rally around your efforts as well. And you'd be surprised how many of them get involved because that's what they do. And I've seen it firsthand. Rod, you had a question if you want to throw it out there.
Yeah, thanks, Evie. First, Jim kind of hit on part of my question, but before I get there, I first want to thank you for your service. I have a son-in-law in law enforcement, and I've done some ride-alongs at night in some really rough neighborhoods when they didn't have backup, they weren't working partners, and I know what law enforcement goes through, and it's just as harrowing as being a soldier. You're a soldier on the civilian end, not the military end. So I appreciate your service, and thanks for that. As far as the Republican women, and you mentioned that you do support different campaigns. So, John Fuller, Republican Fuller here, or Representative Fuller made a note in the chat that you support the education of our children, and Republican women elected to school boards is imperative. So is there financial help also for people running? Does the local organization make financial contributions to vetted candidates? That's the specific question I have.
And the short answer to that is yes, we do. We do offer financial support. We have a vetting committee who's in the process right now of developing the questions for the candidates that are currently running for office, local office in Flathead County. And when that vetting committee completes their work with their questions, those questions will be sent out to our candidates. And again, we're hoping that we'll be able to get all of those candidates at our May 21st meeting as well, so that people have a chance to actually talk to them and they'll all be together in the same room. Many of them do come to our meetings. John comes to our meetings religiously. He comes to our meetings, and thank you, John, for doing that. Yes, we do provide financial support, depending on how much money, of course, we have in our bank account at the time. But then we do, once we vet our candidates and we decide the best candidates that we want to give our money to, then we divide that money up equally among the various candidates. I believe in the 2020 election, we gave $500 to several candidates. Not all of them use the funds, but we donate it to them. So hopefully that will help them in their campaign efforts. Again, all of our fundraising, all of it, with the exception of our operating costs, goes to our candidates.
Evie, I read your newsletter today from Flathead Republican Women. Great job, by the way. The newsletter is wonderful. There's tons of information there. But you chose to close it out by saying that the Democrats are ferociously writing letters. This is in reference to the library board, but what I've also seen is that they're starting to call around to get people to run for school boards across the state and other elected positions. What approach are you taking towards combating the Democrats specifically as Republican women? And I also ask this question because I want to make sure people understand that are on this call that the Democrats are working against us ferociously, as you said it, as of right now.
Well, again, like I said, our goal is to find the best candidates to fill the positions that need to be filled within our county and at our state level. So we do that through our vetting process. Yeah, and I recently just got that same information that there are people out there, and they're not just Democrats that are doing it. There are some members of the Republican Party, and I'll leave it at that, who are doing the same thing. It appears that they are also recruiting candidates to run against some of our own Republican candidates. The most important thing I think we can do is educate people to our candidates' positions and the issues that are important to them. We need to be able to have them speak to the candidates. If people don't talk to the candidates, if the candidates aren't willing to step up and meet people, and I don't know of anyone of ours that are not willing to do that, it's very difficult otherwise to get people to understand who the best candidate is. We certainly can get that information out to our membership once we have our candidates vetted. That's what we do, because the decision to give money to candidates is voted on by the membership. It's not a board decision, it's voted on by our membership. And we have right now 75 members of our organization, which is phenomenal. A few years ago, we had 10. We were almost at the point of having to disband the organization because we had so few members, but we're up to 75 members now. And getting those 75 members the information they need, that they can then get that information out to their neighbors, their friends, the people that they talk to on a regular basis. We're also doing that by having some satellite meetings around the county. We have a satellite meeting scheduled on March 31st. At Craggy Range in Whitefish, where we've invited people to come and hear our position. And by then, we should have our candidates vetted, which means we will be able to put together documentation, brochures, and pamphlets on the candidates that we have vetted, so people can actually read why we support them and what it is they stand for. And of course, we get help from our candidates in doing this. We don't do that in a vacuum. We have to be able to talk to them. But everybody's welcome to come to our meetings. They're open meetings. Everyone is welcome to come. And I encourage anybody who knows somebody who might be reluctant to come for one reason or another to just come and hear what we have to say. At every single meeting, there are candidates there who talk and who are willing to stay after the meeting and speak to people, whether they're guests or members. And that to me is the best way to get the word out. So, we know who the right people are to vote for.
I see that Lee Yandel's on the line. He's running for school board out in my district, and this would be his first time running for office on anything, and several other people that are on these calls. Evie, I know that you're not a political candidate, and that's not the position you've held in the past, but you are a successful woman that has been in the spotlight amongst your constituents. Is there any advice that you would give other women that are running for an office that are going to be in that spotlight amongst their constituents in their own areas?
That's a very interesting question. Having worked in a man's profession, and it is a man's profession in many respects, having worked in a man's profession for many, many years, I think as a woman who's running for office, and I guess I should add here that I did file to be the precinct committee woman for my precinct in 26. I filed last week. So I guess I sort of am running for something, although I don't have any competition at this point, which is a good thing. It makes it a lot easier. But our position was vacant, and so I did file for that position. So with that being said, I think we all have to just, from a woman's standpoint, we just have to be professional. We have to be educated. We have to be well-read. I have expressed myself multiple times to women and Republican women how just awesome it is to sit in a group with a group of women who have the same values, who understand the same things, who watch the same news, who read the same stories and books, and have the same perspectives. And I think you have to educate yourself on the issues. That's critically important, because as a woman, and I'm not saying politics is a man's profession, but in law enforcement, it truly is. And I was in competition with more men than women going through the ranks of the department. I didn't look at it from that perspective. I just looked at it that I had to be able to work hard, prepare the best, and go in and do the best that I could possibly do as a member of law enforcement, not as a woman competing with men. I don't see it as a competition of genders. I see it as a competition of knowledge and dedication and commitment to what you do. If you don't have those things, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to be successful at it. I have never had an issue with working with men or being in a profession with men, because you have to remain professional at all times. But again, you have to prepare yourself for the position that you are going for. And if you're not prepared, I think you should have the position if you're not prepared for it. And preparation is what you do personally. And by that, I mean, you talk to people, you find mentors, you talk to people who are already doing that job or who are doing similar jobs, who are running for similar offices, and you get educated from them and have them serve as mentors for you. Read as much as you can. My husband, although he's in Florida right now, we were talking about the Zoom meeting tonight, and he says, Evie, you're obsessed. And I said, I am, but in a good way. You have to kind of be obsessed with what it is you want to do in order to be good at what you do. It has to be a passion. If it's not a passion, don't do it. That's how I look at it. Every single candidate that I have met since I have been involved with Republican women, I have seen a passion in their eyes that I admire, that in some respects I'm even jealous of, because it's just an unbelievable passion for what they do. And so I want to be, it's like a feeding frenzy for me when I meet candidates. I want to get information from them and talk to them and learn from them. Even as a precinct committee woman, there's a lot I don't know, and I need to speak to people to learn what it is I have to do and gain experience. So that's my recommendation. Don't be intimidated, just be prepared. That's what you have to be, is prepared for whatever position you are going for. And if you don't think you have the preparation, find how to get it. Talk to the right people, read the right books, watch the news, be up on the issues, learn as much as you possibly can. And, you know, don't be afraid to try. I know, Jim, when you and I have talked about that, you know, that's kind of the way you go through life, is don't be afraid to try. You might fail several times, but you never give up. If you really want it badly enough, you just keep trying, and eventually you're going to get what you want.
A wonderful answer. We had a quick question from John, and then I'll go to Rod. John was wondering, can vetted candidates have links to their websites on the Flathead County Republican Women's webpage?
Haven't thought about it, but I don't see why we couldn't do that. And we are in the process right now of redoing our webpage, and that's something that we have to get on right now to do it. So I will, as soon as this call is over, I will make that connection tonight.
Okay, great. Rod, go ahead. You had a question.
Yeah, I did, Evie. This is in regard to family life, okay? And I know that you're one of those women who has a problem not raising her hand, because you always raise your hand. If there's a need, you step up. I mean, I've seen it happen. So I think that's a great quality. And the fact that your husband said you're obsessed, I get it, because that's how I function. My personal problem is sometimes stopping that obsession. How do you recommend people balancing that family life and work life? Because we can always take on more. There is always more to do. And how does your spouse handle that? How do, you know, kids, whether they're grown or not, how do you manage to balance that out a little bit?
Well, first of all, I'm very fortunate to be married to a man who understands my obsession. He has been, you know, what is it they say, behind every successful man is a woman? Well, behind me is a successful man too. My husband had his career in law enforcement. We went different tracks in law enforcement, but he was always supportive of everything that I did. He was at every promotional ceremony, even though he never chose to get promoted because he liked being an undercover cop too much. He's always been there for me and always supported me. And he knows that when I'm bored, I'm not fun to be around. So being involved, it's really true. So being involved in the activities that I'm involved in it's good for me. And because it's good for me, it's good for him. But again, you have to be in a relationship with somebody who understands that. You know, I'm blessed to have that man in my life who understands my obsessions and supports them. He gets to go to Florida and hang out with the guys and enjoy his trip to Florida for his birthday. And I don't mind that either, because while he's away, I've got lots of time to be able to catch up on the things that I need to do. It is a balance. Everything in life is a balance. I love to fish. I love to hike. I love to play with my dogs. I love to do all those things. And I do those things too. But again, it's the service. I hate to sound corny, but those of us who do what we do, and those of us on this call, we have a commitment to service that maybe some people don't even understand. It's in our blood. It's in our heart. When I retired from the police department, well, step back. When my husband retired from the police department in 2001, for about 4 months after he retired, he was horrible to live with. He was like an ogre. And I thought, that's just a guy thing. He'll get over it. Only men feel that way. When I retire, I'll be fine. When I retired, it was like losing a life. It was like grieving for months, being out of that field. Every day I had something to get up and go to, and I loved what I did. So that's why I continue to work with law enforcement, continue to teach, train, and all of those things. I couldn't not do it. Doing what I'm doing now, it's not just that I want to do it. I actually have to do it. It's for my own well-being that I do what I do and love to do it so much. I love being around people. I love being around smart people. I like being around people who are smarter than me. And I find that opportunity with the people that I work with all the time. But again, you just have to have the right people in your life who support you. And that's something that many people are lucky to have. And unfortunately, some are not lucky to have. But you still have to balance it. You have to be willing to step back once in a while. And one other word I will use that kind of helps that, it's called delegation. A lot of people who are quote unquote in charge have a really hard time delegating. I don't. I have a great group of people on my board and people in my organization and our club that if I call up and I say, hey, Jerry, I need you to help me with thus and such, boom, they're on it. And they don't do it because they think I'm passing the buck. They do it because they know I'm busy doing something else, and hopefully they understand that I'm doing it for the good of the organization. So you also have to learn how to delegate, and that's part of leadership, is learning how to delegate. And some people have a lot of problem with that. They don't want to let go of the control. I don't need the control. I need the time to be able to do things that I have to do. And I have to trust the people that work with me that they'll be able to get the things done that they need to get done so we can make this organization successful. So it's delegation, it's passion, and it's understanding. Those are all really important things to have in your life to be able to do this.
The great response. Thank you for that. I would be remiss if I didn't call on John Fuller at least once for a brief history lesson. But John, while you find your mute button, just to lay this up a little bit, Evie, in your newsletter today, there was an article in there about words have power. And, they really do. And at this time of the election cycle, we're starting to see more and more articles come out, letters to the editor in attack of some of our positioning and what we're doing. And John, I know that you were a recent victim, if you want to call it that, because it was hardly an attack, but a victim of some letters to the editor. Do you have any advice for people that are running for office as these things start coming their way and people are attacking them on how they might approach that or look beyond those words, because they do have power regardless of what we say in public?
Well, okay. Well, yes. Thank you, Jim. First, I'd like to address the issue of balance. Okay. But men particularly, but law enforcement and military or other couple of professions that have this problem, is they often identify what they do is who they are. And I've been, a high school teacher and a veteran, but that is not who I am. I have been able somehow, some way, to realize that what you do is not who you are. And so I would suggest that when you look at your job, whether it's a service job in an elected office or look at whatever, just remember that that is not who you are. Okay. And even though some people may identify you as that, you have to continually remind yourself that who you really are and stay focused on that. Now, when it comes to attacks, no one likes to be attacked as I have been recently, or even more particularly as our blessed library board has been. However, I'm kind of an Old Testament Christian there, the George W. Bush School of just absorbing it and rope-a-doping it up against the ropes in today's political climate is not going to work. And I've mentioned this to others before, that my mother wrote me a letter the week before she died. And she told me to put on the whole armor of God. But remember that the armor is only in front. So you must continue to go forward at all times, because your back will always be open unless you're going forward. So in answer to that question, as we said, we have to mobilize our forces and go forward. We can't just assume that the truth will be recognized. We have to proclaim the truth from the loudest rooftops. So in reference to that, as you go into the public life, you're going to be attacked, and as you school board members, you're going to be attacked by people. I mean, look what the school board, library board, excuse me, the library board has gone through. Okay, well, it comes down to, and Bob Heron wrote a letter to the editor that should be published any day now, that puts the crux on it. The real issue is not First Amendment. The real issue is not all of the polemics that have been thrown about. The real issue is who's in charge and who's doing what the people, we the people want. So in reference to the attack, they're going to come, but that is not who you are. You are not what, and so don't let people identify you, and don't assume that what you do is who you are either. You'll be able to keep your rudder deep in the water if you do. I think if you do that, and keep going forward. Do not falter, do not fail. Just keep going forward.
John, thank you for that, because this is a heated time of the season for elections. Evie, as we kind of wrap up here, I just want to thank you for your time and your wisdom and what you do with the Flathead Republican Women. We've already seen 3 messages come through that they want to get vetted. So I'm sure you'll be getting some emails and calls because people are interested in learning more. And, to John's point about, what people say about you, that's not who you are. You will also find out by joining groups like the Republican Women that you've got a support group to help you understand who you are and what you mean to them. So these are great groups to take advantage of. They're there for you. They're like-minded, and there's a tremendous amount of value. And Jerry, don't worry about the competition because they're not on this call tonight. And we're going to give you all the tools you need to win. So I just want to thank everybody for being on the call tonight. If you enjoy these calls and you receive value from them, please refer us and let's get more people on the calls, give them the resources they need, and help them win their elections. So again, thanks for being a part of this tonight. Evie, again, thank you for your time, and the elected officials here as well. Thank you so much, everybody.
Real quick, Jim,
Yeah.
before we exit, next week's call, we have Gary Hall, former mayor of Columbia Falls and former county commissioner, who had a very contested race. He's been out of politics for a while now. And he's been asked to be on several different boards over the years since he's retired. And he's refused all of them until I asked him to be on the mayor's homeless task force. And he said yes. So I've had a chance to work with him as well. A great man, great wisdom, and he will be on next week's call. So it'll be great value again. So don't miss that as also. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Rod. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks.